Evening, everyone, and welcome to the City Council planning session. We do this every fifth Monday on particular topics for the Waterloo City Council to have a little bit further engagement and discussion on things that may come forth in the future. But without further ado, Madam Clerk, could you please read the roll?
Mr. Bozen.
Here.
Mr. Nichols.
Here.
Ms. Creighton-Smith.
Here.
Mr. Childs.
Here.
Mr. Greider.
Here.
Ms. Wilder. Here. And Mr. Foyce.
Here.
All right, thank you. Please join me in a moment of silence. All right. The pledge this evening will be led by at-large Council Member Dave Bozen.
Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to make a motion for the approval of the agenda as proposed. Second.
That motion has been made with the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We have an agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I'd like
sir.
to make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
That motion has been made with the second. That is an electronic vote for the approval of the consent agenda.
Yes.
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 All right. All right, that approved unanimously to approve the consent agenda. All right, and on this meeting, as I indicated, there's two items of discussion this evening. And the first item of discussion is for Telemi Software. This year maybe, attended a Accelerator for America meeting, and we were listening to a presentation by Andrew from Telemi. And the conversation focused on the Telemi software, which is a software that helps you to be able to track properties, to find out who the owners are. And, you know, we had been working for about the last year and a half reviewing some of our ordinances and things that we have with regards to properties to figure out how we can do a much better job. But we started talking internally, and so we thought this software represented a lot of great things to be able to help us in this quest. And as you know, we had the University of Iowa come in last year or 2 years ago and do a study about properties as well. We all know that we have some landlords. I won't use the word slum landlords because I can't use that in a city council meeting, but we have some landlords and some properties that are in serious disrepair. And so we've been trying to figure out how can we put a dent in those things? How can we hold people even more accountable? And our 2030 vision plan, number 2 is elevating housing. And so this software is one that we believe that is in line with helping us to be able to turn the corner, restore our properties in our local community, and hold derelict landlords accountable. So, Andrew, I believe you're on Zoom right now. I want to give you a chance to introduce Telemi to our city council. Wendy, is Andrew out there?
I do not see him yet, Mayor.
Can you call him?
Yes, remember, he was traveling today and was going to pull over to join, so I'm wondering if he's just having a little trouble. So I will try again to reach him.
Oh, he sent me a text, said he's not on yet. And the reason we'll wait a few moments instead of moving to our next one is I believe he needed to be on as close to 5:30 as possible. Any luck, Wendy?
No, no luck.
And you called him? Maybe that's him.
Yes, sir.
All right, we'll wait about 30 more seconds and then move on. Can bring him back during a work session. He was traveling. All right. Well, if he comes on, then we will bring him on. So let's move to the next part of our conversation. And so it's in regards to our local option sales and service tax. And Kelly, you want to get us started?
Sure. I handed out for council just a couple sheets. One is just a general overview on what local option sales tax is that's provided by the Iowa League of Cities. Second is just kind of a roadmap of what is before us as we get ready to pass a new round of local option sales tax. So in order for a city to have a local option sales and service tax, majority of the eligible electors in the city must approve it at a countywide election. So the process that we're going to use for this will be a motion by governing bodies within the county that represents at least half of the population of the county. Since Waterloo is the largest community within the county, the communities that have reached out to Blackhawk County elections have asked that Waterloo take this first step so that we don't have to have a bunch of cities getting together to go through this process. The current local option sales tax expires on December 31st of 2025. So we are kind of getting into the sunset phase. The reason why we're not waiting until 2025 to go through this process is because it doesn't work out with the timings for the elections. The county elections office has said if we're going to do it, we have to do it now. So on the August 7th council meeting, we'll have to have a resolution that council will have to approve. The second step of that process is the Blackhawk County Board of Supervisors has to meet and they have to approve the resolution, and that's what calls for the special, or that's what calls for the election. The new language on that resolution would go into effect on January 1st of 2026. We no longer have to have a sunset in these resolutions as well. So the nice thing is once we do this, it can be in effect until you want to change the language sometime way, way, way in the future. Currently, local option sales tax is 100% allocated to road maintenance. So basically what we need, and Jamie's going to run through some information as well, what we'll need to know from the council tonight is what do you want the language in your local option sales tax referendum resolution to look like? Do you want to keep it the same? Do you have changes, etc.?
All right, Jamie, give us some conversation on the history of local option sales tax and how we've been able to use it.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Kelly did a great job on providing a little bit of the vote and the technical side behind it. What I want to talk about is where we are with our roads and what may happen if there are changes to our ballot language. So I promise I will keep this to under 100 slides. No, I'm just teasing you. I only have about 20 of them here, so. First off, just want to start with a little indication of our street distribution. What you're seeing there, the number of miles that both Public Works and engineering are tasked with maintaining. Roughly about 430 miles of streets in this town, broken down into the different local, arterial, and collector streets. And at the bottom of the slide there, hopefully you can see it, but it talks about kind of what the arterial streets are, such as San Martin, Shawless, Airline Highway, Donald Street, MLK, and then what the collector streets are, the Orange Roads, the Huntingtons, the Westfields, Burton Avenues, East Force. So the idea is that the local roads in front of people's homes feed into the collectors then feed into the arterials, and that's just how kind of the traffic system works. So how do we rate our roads? So what we do, or what you're going to see here on the screen, is that the state of Iowa actually goes through and hires a company to drive our roads every 2 to 4 years. And what you're seeing on the left there is a van that shows.
Hey,
Go
Jamie,
ahead.
actually, Dan is on
Gone.
right now.
Yep.
So give us a second,
Yeah, no,
and we'll
absolutely.
go through the 100 slides you have
Yep,
in a moment or two.
absolutely.
So sorry about that.
That's all right.
Dan, are you on? Is Dan on?
One second, Mayor.
If Chris has it, do you have the presentation on your laptop? Do you mind sending it?
He is logging in.
All right. Dan, how are you, sir?
Good afternoon. How is everybody doing today?
We are great. We are great. I kind of set the stage for the conference going back to for the conversation going back to first hearing the presentation at the accelerator meeting to some of our housing task force in which we are taking a look at housing and how to improve housing. And so the stage has been set and the bar is pretty high right now, Dan. So I have the Waterloo City Council with me. So if you want to lead us through the presentation of the software.
Wonderful. I appreciate everyone inviting me on today. We're Ptolemy. We're a Boston-based software company born out of Harvard on the heels of 2008. Essentially, they identified the need for cities to be more data-driven in their approach, but they were really struggling to do so because of what we call data silos. So essentially, all of the city's different software systems contain valuable data that gets created on a day-to-day basis. The county also has valuable data, the state may have valuable data, the federal government has valuable data. In order to use that operationally and short-term strategically, the city needs a way to centralize that data into a single place. And so that's where we start with all of our partner cities. We will build and manage connections into all these disparate data systems that exist throughout those government agencies and extract the data out on a nightly basis. So looking at the Albany data here, we're pulling information from the assessor on property attributes and building attributes. We'll pull information on the owner, but then we start adding what we call Ptolemy Insights. So it's derived predictive analysis. It's going to become really important to city staff and how they operate. So information on where does the owner live? Are they a large scale or small scale property owner? This is critical when we talk about naturally occurring affordable housing. Do you guys own it or another public entity? Is it held via some sort of business type as opposed to an individual? This is binary on this above. Is it a rental property or is it owner occupied? How long has the owner owned that particular property? Is it vacant or is it occupied? We'll also pull your building permits, your code enforcement cases violations, your taxes and lien data, your police and fire incidents, 311 calls, utility usage, USPS mail delivery data, rental registry data, any other registries you have, vacancy, foreclosure, home sale data, obviously all of your ESRI stuff, ACS information, possibly eviction data. So all of this information is being pulled on a nightly basis so that you can easily use it to filter down and identify properties that hit particular criteria, build out scores to prioritize limited resources, as well as start building out analysis on the effectiveness of programs. And instead of saying things like, hey, we demolished 15 properties last year, you can look at the world as in around those properties. So you can start asking yourselves questions, where we took preventative action, did we see changes in the surrounding communities? So did we see improvements in building permits getting pulled, decreases in tax delinquency, decreases in code violations? And all of this is built into an easy-to-use piece of software where most members of the city could actually come in here and use it without any training. We do provide unlimited training for city staff, but it's extremely easy to use. Let me just kind of show you a quick filter for Rochester, New York, where we can come in here and say, show me all of my non-owner occupied residential structures. And so these are all of the rentals across the city today. And tomorrow this will get updated with additional information. So we're monitoring home sales and we'll actually see homeowners sell to investors and vice versa. So we can see the 22,405 rentals across the city. They give a certificate of occupancy upon successful inspection. So if I click no here, this will actually show us the 4,800 properties across the city of Rochester that are not in compliance with our rental registration program. And then we can help the city use the underlying data to prioritize outreach work to get these properties into compliance. So importantly, using information on things like open code violations. So showing all of the non-compliant properties that have multiple code violations, maybe go into police incident data and say, hey, in the last 24 months, they have a police incident. And so very quickly and easily being able to filter down and identify the properties that hit that criteria. Maps can be nice, but very often we're looking at these as lists or building out analytics here. But I'm actually going to pop into one of these properties and show you the property profile. So all of that information we centralized is now available in a single place. And so city staff can type in an address or click one of the dots and come in here and learn all the different attributes about the property, information on the owners, timeline of the different events that have happened at the property, all the different layers it's tied to. So everything from what police beat to what's the trash pickup day, which ward is it in, and then a tabular format of all the events. So code probably has access to their code violation information, but they very much like to know if there's been violent crime on the property before they start writing tickets, right? And so they can actually come in here, see this in the field, and have full visibility of what's happening at the property. Additionally, they have the ability to go into the owner, and particularly when we're talking about problematic owners, they try to obfuscate who they are through shell corporations and variations on spellings of their name. And so we've built an algorithm based on data from 150 cities across the country where we can actually link those owners together. He's just using different addresses here. But so now we can see that he holds these 7 properties, and we can see all of the different challenges that this person's creating for the city. This is actually not a bad owner at all here. But very often what we'll find is someone who actually owns 100 properties across the city and is doing so through 70 or 80 different LLCs to try to hide the fact that they're making such a negative impact on the community. I want to show you one other very quick example here using the home sale data that I talked about, where we can come in here and look to see where all my homeowner to investor sales are, right? So we have neighborhood change of moving from owner occupied into rentals. And so let's look at this via census block group. And I very quickly can see there's a few neighborhoods here that are very high on this list. And so if I narrow down to those properties, and look at them on a map, I can start to get the understanding of the density that is happening. So over the 2 years, all of these properties have moved from owner occupied to rental. On top of that, I can start adding layers on issues like mom and pop landlords. So mom and pop landlords have a tendency to provide the vast majority of your naturally occurring affordable housing, and it's an asset that you would like to protect. We also want to look at currently owner occupied properties, and then let's overlay information on tax delinquency. And so we can start to get an understanding here of not just the neighborhood change, but granularly going down to the individual property level and identifying properties that we might want to be approaching with proactive assistance. So we've seen cities use this information to connect mom and pop landlords with funding low and no interest loans in order for them to sign covenants where they'll keep the property affordable for a certain number of years, allowing the city to protect that asset of naturally occurring affordable housing or possibly keeping owner-occupied owners within this neighborhood. So this is a really brief introduction to the sort of work we do, but very common use cases that we see across the country. So I'll pause there and I guess open it up for questions if that's the appropriate thing to do.
Right. Anyone questions?
Seems like this could really unlock our.
Could you?
Seems like this could just really unlock our capabilities from an enforcement standpoint and being proactive about some of the challenges we have.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry.
Speaking to the mic so he can hear you too.
What's the upfront cost and then the annual subscription?
Dan, you want to talk about the cost?
Sure. So this is based on an annual subscription with a one-time implementation fee. I'm pulling up your quote right now. Let's see. So for you guys, sorry, give me one moment.
Was that 2,500, 3,500? It was off of zero.
I'm in.
Yeah. sorry, my system.
Dan, I have those numbers.
Oh, perfect. I appreciate it. Yeah, my
So,
system needs to log in.
What Andrew quoted to us was a $25,000 annual fee plus a $5,000 one-time setup fee.
Okay.
That one-time setup fee includes them linking all our existing data systems that we choose to put into the system. And then it also is, they will, in future years, add additional systems at no cost. So if we get a new software system in our code enforcement office or over in the fire department, they will link those up as well at no additional cost. There is a fee, a license fee per user, but we would probably go with an enterprise system that would allow unlimited users for $5,000 a year, bringing it to investment of $30,000 a year for this software. And I want to remind you that he's demonstrated probably the one area that we're most excited about is a rental registration program that is more robust and gives us more accurate data to work with. But we see that we've presented this to multiple departments in the city. Public Works is seeing that there are great applications for them, as well as fire and the PD. So it's going to be helpful across the city.
Okay, and then besides the upfront cost, is this something that the general public has access to, or just the city?
Just the city.
Just the city, okay. And
Actually, to correct you there, so you can publish some, none, or all of this data to the public. So it's the city's option if you want to publish some of this data and make it available. That's all part of the licensing fee that's already been mentioned.
and if we approve this, what's the time frame for your work?
Typical implementation.
Go ahead, Dan.
Typical implementation is 12 weeks from signature to launch.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Sir?
So
657.
I'm very excited about this for housing. I also think about the youth conversation we're having about youth opportunities and being able to look at PD data and overlay that data with housing and being able to overlay that data with other environmental factors we know are impacting young folks in terms of opportunities is huge. This could be a game changer. I definitely get that folks might be a little concerned about the cost, but the amount of money that we could save trying to keep houses from having to go through the 657A process, or helping folks maintain their homes, or helping young folks find opportunities by investing in neighborhoods that look like they need it before any of that costs us more. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and this seems like a very good ounce of prevention for the city of Waterloo.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I think this is a really cool software. I think that it has a lot of potential. My concern is an overload of data that is not used effectively. I've seen many circumstances in other organizations that I've been a part of that have had access to extremely accurate information, but not the processes in place for employees to use that information in a way that's effective for their current strategies. So I'm not opposed to using something like this, but for the cost that this will incur, I would like to see how staff is going to use this, a plan, something that's going to say, this is what we're going to do, because this is going to require even more collaboration between our departments. And I just want to see that happen before we commit funds to it.
So this is probably about the fourth or fifth presentation. Our staff has seen this product. They've been able to ask questions. They've been able to talk about their particular departments, what they have for information, how this can integrate into the system. As Wendy mentioned, Public Works sees a role with this, PD, fire, building. But folks have vetted this property before it actually got here today, right?
Okay.
Because we want to make sure those that are using it are most aware of what's there. I think with this is that right now, folks have to do like Marty has to do various searches because Marty may be asked a question over how many times PD has been there, or Marty may be asked a question, who owns this property, and go through an entire list to find out who owns this. Eric in planning, who is wanting to see if there are code violations, but this is not individual for department. This is a repository of information that each department uses. The software platform that Dan is talking about and Andrew is shaped upon staff suggestion, right? And so this is what we've been asking for years internally. I mean, we have several different committees. We have the task force that I just mentioned that we put into place to try to figure out how we could change our code. We have our dilapidated housing committee that meets and takes a look at a list and have to get all this information. We have, different places that have particular violations. And so staff has already gone through this to take a look at this system. And instead of having individual silos, this pulls all the information that we need on a daily basis. I mean, council, we have some landlords that have an LLC, that have one LLC. And then, he's going to look to see who the violator is, who has a dilapidated property. But then you look, and then this person or individual has another LLC with 5 different names. And then from that, you have individuals that own multiple properties. And not all properties are bad, but staff has been looking and reviewing this for months before it actually came to council. What we would like to do, if it is your blessings, to go ahead and find where the resources can come from. But this system is built based upon our suggestions for the folks to put it together. So there's plenty of places where there's a lot of information, but this is information that city staff needs on a daily basis, and that's what this system is going to be built upon.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry. So this is not only will it save money in the long run, because if I could imagine the process that different staff of different departments would have to go through to obtain the data that's available in this repository, it would take hours.
Yeah.
So this would also be a cost saving. It may seem like a cost at first, but over time it will save time because there will be less time and energy that the staff will have to utilize to collect that data.
Mr. Mayor, so I'm not opposed to this, and I completely agree with that statement. That's not what I'm saying. I think maybe I was unclear.
You want to make sure that what we have is something that can be used. I was just letting you know.
Yeah,
that
of course.
Before we got to the point where we brought it to council,
that we've had plenty of meetings.
We've been meeting.
So I guess I see that this could do a lot more than our original intention. We could use it for other purposes beyond what we already need it for, and I guess that's what I want to see. I don't really want to elaborate anymore because I'll be confusing at some point. But I guess that's what I'm talking about, is seeing beyond what we're doing. Yes, we need it for something we need. I've talked with Mr. Anderson about the need for something like this since I've been on council. But what else can we use it for to fix things in the future, I guess?
So, Mr. Mayor, it sounds like my colleague is, we were presented one of the use cases for the search, and he's wanting to see what the other use cases the departments have. So like, what would be the use case example for public works, and what would be the use case examples for fire? And I think that's kind of
that's definitely
more use cases, or you would like to see what the other use cases look like.
Yes, and what could we potentially use it for in the future if we're going to have this software that's going to be indefinite. And then one other thing that I would like to know is, are there other departments that are already using tracking software or anything like that now, and are we duplicating efforts with this for those respective departments?
Well, this takes all of that software and places it into one system.
Mm-hmm.
So, you may have housing authority that use, is it Happy? What's the name of the software? Or is it code enforcement? But this takes all of those and puts it into one place where we can actually get it at. And so there's uses. And like I said, we have had staff go through a myriad of different uses that may be held. So you want a work session to figure out what each department does? Because it's going to take 3 months for this to even be set up. And that comes with them working with department heads and staff to put the information in there. So
so this software creates no data. It simply collects it.
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so our system will both centralize data from the various systems that exist throughout the city, the county, and the federal government, as well as use that data to derive additional predictive analysis that the city is not going to have around what are rental units, what are the sale types, where do these owners live, and predict and where your vacant properties are. So we will enrich it with essentially these additional pieces of information. Importantly, I like to say in these conversations, we're not Microsoft. We're not selling you a piece of software and coming back in 11 months to collect a renewal fee. We view this as an ongoing partnership. So we have teams of subject matter experts as well as data scientists on our team that we encourage all of our partner cities when they have additional initiatives or new departments that they would like to start using the software. We like to have conversations, and we will help you understand what sort of analysis you should be looking at, what the typical pitfalls that we see around the sort of analysis that you guys are looking to build, and we can help build that out for you from the ground up. So it's very common for us to start with a single use case or 2 use cases. And as additional departments come in, we can actually help work with you to expand those uses. And because of the way it's licensed, we're not going to charge you extra money for those additional use cases. You just continuously get more value out of the application.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree with what all my colleagues said, because I literally just had to reach out to Marty recently just to ask about the service calls on a location. So it would be great to have all of that information just in front of me without having to call anyone, so that we can make decisions a lot quicker. And just for cost sake, I would like to know, so we know how much the cost is, and I could assume how much a city would save by using a software like this, but I'm curious if there are any estimate of numbers, like what would this save us yearly with this type of software?
Mr. Mayor.
And I know it'll be different for each department. Like Public Works would save something different. We would save time or something else, but like, what will be a good estimate?
Half a person's salary, one person.
I can go through and ask the department heads to say if they push a button.
Mr. Mayor, maybe Dan could give us some examples, maybe of what other cities that are comparable have saved, and that could give us an idea.
Yeah.
Then uses in other cities, and also any types of savings realized.
That's always going to depend on the sort of programs that you guys are running. But just from a rental registry perspective, our ability to identify non-compliance, it can help drive additional fee revenue as people continue to register new properties that they wouldn't have necessarily registered. That can easily surpass the value of the software right there. You'll also see huge savings as far as efficiencies. You have 2 types of efficiency. The first is I spend 10 hours a week trying to gather this data, and now that frees up 25% of my time, 25% of my salary. You'll also see increases in efficiencies of wait time. So code enforcement emails the police department asking about a particular property. They can't proceed until they have a response, which might be days. within the software, you can see it immediately. And so all of those existing processes can move along a lot faster. There's also can be huge savings in research around site development for economic development. We've also done big work around homestead exemptions on taxes and identifying people that are homesteading to properties that aren't supposed to. So it's really going to come down to the use cases that you guys are hitting. But it's pretty common for the software to above and beyond pay for itself with those savings.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Dan, I got a question. So does your software have any capabilities to embed data into the roads surrounding the properties? So I can, in my mind, as I'm just thinking about it, I'm thinking there could be some, I guess, collaboration between departments in that front as well.
Yeah, I would need to understand a little bit more about what you're trying to achieve, but it's not uncommon for us to consume data basically around the properties as well. A very common example would be what we refer to as police incidents nearby. Just because a property is at an intersection where there are a lot of police incidents does not necessarily mean that that is a problem property. It might just be a dangerous intersection. And so we can consume the information from the various sources and tie them to areas within the city so that they're not actually tied to the specific properties when you run that analysis.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, may I make a comment?
Yes, ma'am.
So even if we don't have a software system in place, if we are gathering information into Excel spreadsheets, say we wanted to create, do something with our sidewalk program and look at those neighborhoods and identify the people that live in those specific neighborhoods where we're putting, where it's time to replace sidewalks, we would be able to upload those spreadsheets and use that data. That's really the beauty of this. No department is going to have to change what they do. They all get to use the software that they've already made the investment into, and then on a nightly basis, it will automatically update the Ptolemy system. And actually, Ptolemy is the company name. The software that we're looking at, it has another name. Dan can tell us. But it's going to be as good as the data that we put into it. And so if we decide that we want to do something, as Councilman Greider said, that has an environmental impact and we want to look at that, if we can provide that data in a spreadsheet, then we'll be able to overlay that data as well.
Really?
Mr. Mayor, is there anything you need from us tonight?
No, I just wanted to introduce it. We have some more conversation about how it will be paid for, maybe be different departments chipping in, but we need to have that conversation. But I wanted to make sure all of you, we've been talking about housing for years and how we could take that next step. You know, we didn't even talk about the cost of being able to get to some of these properties a little bit earlier before they actually dilapidated. So if we can save, 2 to 3 properties, I mean, that's a savings already, but I wanted to introduce it. Dan, Wendy, can you provide council with contact information for Dan or Andrew in case you have any direct questions you may want to ask them? And I think he said it takes, 12 weeks to even get all the information integrated. So that'll be staff time working together. I mean, and it may be something, I don't know if there's even something that maybe Dan, that other council members had asked for from the different municipalities that you work with that may be of interest directly to the council also. Any other comments, Dan?
Yeah, certainly. So happy to get over mine and Andrew's contact information so that you guys could reach out with additional questions. But yes, very common that council members use the software as well. So let's just say you are interested in, I'll run where are all of the vacant properties across the city, and then I can break that down by, I believe they use wards, they use council districts. And so we can break that down and have an understanding across council districts. This is using property count, but maybe we're interested in police incidents at those vacant properties. We're very quickly able to understand what's happening across all of these different data sets and give you the insights that you need. Another huge advantage for council members is members of the community come in with concerns about a particular property, and you don't necessarily have visibility into what is happening at that property, right? So your ability to come in here and see, hey, I do see that there is an open code case. It hasn't risen to the level of violation because they have been given a 7-day period to remediate the issue. Giving you the ability to really understand what's happening at a property when somebody comes and asks has been a major win for a lot of council members.
Any other questions, anyone? All right, Dan, thank you so much for joining us this evening, and we will have a little bit more conversation in the next week or so, and then get back to you. So thank you so much for taking time out this evening.
I appreciate it. Have a great day, everyone.
All right, you too. Bye-bye. All right, back to Jamie.
So I think where I left off was just kind of starting to give you an idea of how we figure out the condition of the street. So the vehicle that you're seeing there, that's what the state uses. They contract with a vendor to drive all our streets every couple years. That data is then, after it's collected, is taken and given to Iowa State University. Iowa State University takes that, crunches all the numbers. But what it does is it's collecting cracks, potholes, faulting, spalling, all the things that you would generally see on a road. One of the interesting things that you'll see here, the data on the picture on the left is imagery showing in a bad street. That's an asphalt street. Sometimes we can fix those things. There's surface defects. Sometimes we can fix those things. The picture on the right, that's an old concrete street that's been patched. All the joints are falling apart. At some point, there is no patching that anymore. It has to be reconstructed. So the state collects all this information, and then it's given to Iowa State University. They do through some processes, through some engineering calculations, basically they come up with a rating on a street from 0 to 100. 0 being there's nothing left, and 100 is a brand new street that we just opened. Okay, so using this index as a guide from 0 to 100, what we do is we go in and then place these roads into specific categories from very good to very poor. And then they take that rating, add the functional class, whether it's a collector, a local, then they also will add in the number of lanes, the traffic volume, things like that. And our pavement management consultant then takes all this information that Iowa State comes out and spits out one number, takes it and puts it into this software called DTIMS. And that is where then they take and start applying budgets to this data. So here's an example of once these streets have been rated, what does it actually look like? Anything from 0 to 100. And I wanted to show some pictures of what some of these things look like so you get an idea. Most of the roads in Waterloo are listed as a fair road, about half of them. You can see what those look like. That's Olson Road over off Hammond. It's an old concrete street that's been overlaid. You can see all the bumps, the joints, all the pavement is starting to fall apart. That's what the majority of our roads, or about half of our roads, look like in Waterloo. The poor categories, and these are the ones that we have to reconstruct. The Webster Street was done in 2022 because it was so bad. Fletcher Avenue, that's over there just on the south side of University, We reconstructed that as part of the University Avenue project. But these are the ones, the poor and the very poor, those are the ones that there's nothing left. We have to start over at that point. So one of the things that I wanted to show is just the condition of our streets broken out as an overall for the entire network by the arterials, collectors, and the locals. Again, you can see about half of our roads are in the fair category. Fair meaning they're going to continue to decline and slide down into the poor and the very poor. And the good and the very good are going to continue to slide down to the poor. I wish there was a way that we could do these streets and have them stay at the very good or good level without having to do much, but that's not how things work in the real world. So again, most of our streets, fair, poor, or very poor. So I know some of you had seen this slide before, at least the portion that's on the left-hand side. This is what, in 2018, what our streets look like. Our streets were the best in the state, period. Not Jamie's numbers. This is state information, state collected data, processed through Iowa State. Look at where we are now. A few years later, we're down to a 67. So one of the things as you start to look at this a little bit deeper is you start to look at cities like Ankeny, West Des Moines, Urbandale. Their roads are going up. But again, right now, what are they seeing? Huge increases in construction. So they're building new roads. The average raises the average up. That's good and bad. The bad news is, well, the good news is that they're growing. The bad news is all of these streets 30 years down the road are going to come due at the same time. I don't know how many of you remember, or I didn't grow up here, but when I showed up in the early 90s, they were just finishing up a thing called interstate substitution. A lot of you may know or may have heard of that. Streets like Kimball, Amesboro, West Fourth, Shawless, Independence, Dysart, Katowski, Green Hill, East Park Avenue, San Martin, 5th and 6th Street, Wagner, Ridgeway, and MLK were all constructed through this interstate substitution. And all of those were done between 1983 and 1992. And guess what? They're all coming due at the same time. And that's what I am fighting. That's what Public Works is fighting, trying to keep these roads in good shape. And that's as I go through that list, you start thinking about that. Amesboro, from San Martin all the way to 218. Independence, from downtown clear out to the east side of downtown, or the east side end of it. These are long stretches, 4-lane roads. It takes a huge amount of money to maintain these roads, to keep them overlaid, to reconstruct them. The other thing to keep in mind is all of these streets are collectors and arterials. These are the ones that are going to be coming due in the next 5 to 7 years. And these are roads that people have a travel count of between 20 or 2,000 on something like Wagner and 20,000 on San Martin. That's a lot of people driving on these roads every day that notice if they are not in good shape, that are going to see the deterioration over the next 5 to 7 years and what may happen. Uh-oh, what'd I do, Chris? Oh, hit the wrong button. So this is a little bit of a different picture. This is same data as the previous slide, but this is showing what's happened to our road since 2014. You can see, and I'm not trying to downplay what's going on here, the numbers are going down. And they're not going down by a lot, but the downward trend is what should be disturbing to everyone, that they are going down. And nothing I can do to stop that. Nothing Public Works can do to stop that at this point. So I've had 2 pavement management studies completed by a consultant that helps determine what I should be doing and when I should be doing it for these roads. And there are a number of things that came out of this. But the bottom at the bottom on the left-hand side, an increased funding strategy, long-term funding strategy needs to be determined by 2026 to prevent the city from getting into a position where the network deterioration speeds up. Meaning, if we don't have an influx of funding to keep these roads at the level they are now, they are going to deteriorate even faster than what they have been on the previous slide. And on the right-hand side, the average total budget to maintain the existing conditions that we have right now, we need to be spending almost $11 million a year for the next, out until 2036, to keep our roads at the condition they are now. You'll see later on down the line that we're looking on a good year or on an average year of about $10 million in local option. We're telling us we need to be spending more than what we're bringing in right now, just to keep our roads where they are. If you take nothing else away from my presentation tonight, this is probably the most important slide that you need to look at. Again, what this is showing you on the top portion of this graph is the condition of our roads. The black line in there is our base budget, what my consultant ran at $8 million a year. That's what I have for construction. That's just what engineering does in our recons, our overlays, our railroad crossings, things like that. What it's showing you is that at $8 million a year out through 2036, at the current funding right now, the roads will get worse, and there is not a thing I can do about it to stop it, or Public Works. We just can't. Bottom half of this, what you're seeing is that the backlog is going to increase. Right now, I've got a current backlog of about 15 miles that I can't get to based on funding. And that by 2036, at the same rate, that $8 million a year, I'm gonna have a backlog of 37 miles of roads that need work. This also shows various changes in the local option if council is thinking about wanting to change the vote language.
We'll get to that in a second.
This is what can happen. Any diversion is going to make things worse on our roads.
Jamie, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
How much do we currently have in reserves?
I don't know right off the top of my head.
We have enough money in reserves to, if council decides to use some property tax relief, that we can add a portion back just from reserves and maintain the same level during that time. But I'll let you finish the presentation, and then we'll have some discussion by council.
This is one of the things that over the last 3 years, this came up in one of my magazines that I get here this past month. Highway construction costs up 50% since the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. Waterloo's seeing my current prices, I'm seeing anywhere from 5 to 50% increases over the last 3 years. This came from Moody's earlier in this month. Now, most of that talked about, it was dealing with the end of the student loan moratorium and what will happen to commercial real estate, but the bottom paragraph there talks about what could happen here as things change with that pause being removed, that you're going to see a reduction in spending. How are local option dollars spent? Well, here it is. I'd spend about $900,000 a year in salaries, benefits, supplies, vehicles, gas, those sorts of things for my staff to do the inspections on our road construction. Public Works gets around $1.1 million a year for seal coating, salaries, equipment, and all those sorts of things. But the bulk of the funding comes from or goes to our roads. A little bit about what we do every year. Well, here it is. Looking at about, since 2000, about 2.5 miles of streets that we reconstruct, about 5.5 miles of streets a year since 2000. The interesting thing is when this first started from 1991 to 2000, Waterloo was averaging 3.5 miles a year in a recon and 9.8 miles a year in an overlay compared to what you're seeing now. The numbers are down. The general point of this is that inflation is eating away at our local option funding, and it's hard to keep things where they are. This is what's been done since 1991. Now, some of that, when you take a look at that, some of those numbers may seem like, oh, we've done everything in the city. Well, that's not necessarily true. Some of those miles in the 209 there that have been overlaid, we're working on our third overlay of Franklin Street in the 30 years I've been here. San Martin's been done a couple times. So not every street has had some work done to it, and there is still a lot out there that haven't been done. Typical construction costs, just to give you an idea of where things are. This year, 2.5 miles, $2.5 million a mile for the recon. In 2013, 1.6 million. Our costs, same thing with the overlay. Our costs have nearly doubled in the last 10 years, and the funding has stayed flat. So here's the sales tax that I get from our finance department every month. This goes through 2023. There is, when you look at 2021, 22, and 23, you can see that the local option peaked in 2022 at around 13.8 million. Last year, we lost what? 1.1 million in 23, just in decreased spending. I just got my one for this month. Right now, the projection is 11 million for this fiscal year, for 24. So where I'm going with this is, and that's at the bottom here, that from 2008 to 2020, you're looking at about $10 million a year in average. And I think that's where we're going to settle in at. The numbers show it. I think we're going to settle back to that $10 million average that we've seen for a long time. Just so some of you know, how did we pay for roads beforehand? Before 1991, it was all bond funds. That was it. $1.5 million a year. That's what they were spending in 1991. Put $1.5 million into the CIP this year on the $6 million that were council approved this year for FY24. That's almost 25% of the budget. If you had to put that back in for bonding for roads. And I should say that local option picked all that up. I don't remember the exact date, but the city stopped bonding for roads, and local option picked that up. So there was a tax savings there. The local option vote. Here's where it gets really interesting. And I want everybody to understand the way the local option vote works. Waterloo, Cedar Falls, Hudson, Evansdale, Raymond, and Elk Run all vote as one block. So all 6 cities have their own ballot language, whatever it is each council wants to put on there. But for the vote, they will tally up all the yeses and all the nos for all 6 communities, and as long as there's one more than 50%, it passes. But take a look at the support for local option. And this is a vote, or this is a tax that we are asking people to pay. And not just Waterloo citizens. I've seen estimates anywhere from 25 to 30% of these costs are paid by outside visitors. I don't know about you, but anything above 70%, that seems pretty incredible, asking people to vote on a tax. And as Kelly mentioned earlier, the current loss runs through December 31st, 2025. Assuming it passes, the new vote would run from January 1, 2026 to December 31st, 2035. I'd been meeting previously for the last several months with the mayors and staff of the other cities in the county. And they had all, were talking about keeping all of their ballot language the exact same as what it is now. One of the things, though, that is worrisome is the fact that council could go ahead and approve a change to the language. Goes out to a vote. Waterloo citizens vote it down. They don't like the ballot language, whatever is proposed, they could vote it down. We could be in a situation where the Waterloo citizens vote it down, but there are enough yes votes in the surrounding communities to carry it. Meaning the Waterloo citizens would be stuck with whatever that language is, even if they didn't want it. So one of the things, and I got this information from finance, and I wanted to put it out there just because folks should see what, in my opinion, what this looks like. So I asked our finance department if we took $1 million out of local option and applied it to what the current rates are, the current rollbacks, we'd be looking at a total savings for 1 year on a $100,000 home of $23.64. That's a year. That's just city taxes. And that's assuming that the state rollback stays the same.
Jamie, the only thing I'm saying, like right now, this is way over into talking about property taxes. You're an engineer. So can you kind of, let's get through this?
Okay. So just wanted folks to understand what you're looking at. I guess one of the things that, and I just have to say, and there's only so much that I can do. You've seen the numbers. Right now, I do not have enough money, along with Public Works, to maintain our roads in the current conditions that they are, period. I can't say it any plainer than that. Any diversion of funding from local option from our roads, they're going to continue to get worse. That's all I can tell you. And I've been looking for 5 years now, since I've been appointed to this position, trying to find a way to improve these roads. I wish I had a magic wand, but I don't. And the tough part is, it bothers me because I can't keep these roads in a good condition, and I've been looking for it. And now I may be forced to see them deteriorate even faster. So, again, that's the information that I have. Council needs to understand if they make these changes, there's nothing that Public Works and I can do to stop it, stop the deterioration.
So Jamie, I just got a quick question. So in FY23, we had, I think it was $12,762,000 that we actually received from lost dollars. In other revenues, there were $756,000 plus dollars, which equated to about $13,518,000. You take salary and benefits out of that for road construction related jobs, that's $1.23 million. And we spent $6.2 million and $9,000 on equipment. And so from that 13 million, I think we saved into reserves about 6 million. Now we know that there's 2 million that's planned to come from that to deal with projects. I can't remember if it was San Martin or what street. Charles Road. And so we have pretty healthy reserves. So what I want to do is maybe you and Bridget can sit down. And I know previously there was an information shortage when it comes to finding out about reserves and those things. I know that. But we have very healthy reserves according to this document. So I don't, that's why I ask if you've actually seen this, because I just asked for this report, but very healthy right now.
Yeah, there's another almost 2 million that has to come out to pay for the bridges.
Right, exactly.
Along with the 2 million for Shawless.
And still healthy.
And then over the next 5 to 7 years, we were looking at about a $12 million shortfall for LaPorte Road.
And still healthy. So, yeah, we need to have a conversation. The conversation we're having right now, and I've had conversations with Mayor Green. Thank you for the presentation, Mayor Green of Cedar Falls as well. But going back 10 years ago, and trying to figure out, with our tax rate, what is the difference between the city of Waterloo and some other communities? And so I think it came down to about three differences. And Councilman Bozen and I have had long conversations. And number one, when you take a look at about the top 10 to 11 largest cities, the city of Waterloo has like the second or third lowest property valuations, right? So that means we are in a tough challenge right now just about the how much our properties are. And so that's why you see us doing initiatives going right back into neighborhoods around our community and trying to help neighbors and residents create more value. So there's a concentration in Church Road. There's a concentration in the Walnut area. There's programs and things that we're trying to work towards to create more value and have better housing. Another area is that the city of Waterloo, out the top 10, 11 largest cities, had either the second or third most taxable ag land. And we know with regards to ag land that's taxed differently, right? And I'm not trying to erase all the ag land. This is Iowa. But we do know that taking some of that land, turning it residential, transforming some parkland in other areas, takes and puts that onto our tax roll. So that's number two. So we've been trying to work on that. Number three is the usage of local option sales tax for our communities. And so when you take a look at other cities, Ames, local option sales tax began in 1987, and 60% so Ames, Sioux City, Davenport, and Bettendorf, 60% of their local option sales tax goes towards property tax relief, and 40% goes to other improvements. The city of Dubuque, West Des Moines, Urbandale, and Des Moines, 50% of their local option sales tax goes to property tax relief, and the other 50% goes to other improvements. The city of Marion, 70% goes to street and sewer, and 30% goes to other improvements. I had a conversation with the strategic initiatives director in Dubuque, asking, how are you able to keep up with your streets? And like Mr. Knudsen had indicated, our streets rank very high amongst other communities, but 30% of their local option sales tax goes towards streets and roads. And so I asked, how is that possible? How are you doing that? Because their lost dollars are almost similar to ours. And one is that they're doing their best to try to do several different projects and do some of the overlays and smaller projects in-house. And so I had a conversation with Randy, and we're going to, Randy from Public Works, to work and put together to see some sort of study about the possibilities of what we can do internally as well, so that we can continue to keep up. I had a conversation with Noel about the uses of TIF, and we have to take a look to see how many roads are within our 5-year plan that are actually in some of our TIF districts, to see if we can have a possible impact that way as well. And so, we hear all the time, there's two things we hear about, right? Mm-hmm. We hear about potholes and we hear about them property taxes. And so it was a thought. I've had conversations with individual council members, not all at the same time. And, you know, for years it had either been let's look at 10% or let's look at 50%. And so uh, I wouldn't propose 50%, given especially what we've just seen. But it seems like from a couple of you that I've spoken with, 20% um, is a percent that you can rest on. And then we will do our best to work with different departments to try to make sure that we don't continue to move further behind. But I don't know. The citizens always talk about property taxes, property tax relief. We do have people in the city that's hurting too. And so the thought would be property tax relief, not pet projects, but property tax relief. So council, what are your thoughts with this conversation?
Mr. Mayor.
Sir?
And I don't know who, maybe Jamie, you can help us, or Kelly. The state was looking at making changes to the lost figures this year, similar to what they did to the property taxes. We know that that has died, but is there concern that it will come back in the future, and how might that impact anything we do, whether we change the language or not?
Jamie Knudsen, city engineer. I can tell you based on the previous, they've tried this 2 years in a row. Based on the last 2 years, what they have been proposing was a specific end date for the local option. And at that point, then council would have what they call a revenue purpose statement, but basically council would have a resolution then to how they were going to spend the money. That was one of the things. The other one was they were going to leave the local option taxes. If you had a current tax, it would stay in place until it expired. And then at that point, it would be up to the council to have a resolution of how they were going to spend that. So they were looking to eventually remove the voters from making that decision and putting it into the hands of council.
Okay, but they were not going to take that funding. There was some talk, I thought, of.
So they were going to then turn around. The projections I saw from last winter was they were going to make some changes on that and then possibly maybe have to backfill things. But the projections sheet that I got for Waterloo specifically was not going to see any change in our local option dollars, total local option dollars coming to Waterloo. Okay. That's the last one I saw. Bridget maybe saw something different, but that was the last one that I saw.
But if there was a change, they were talking about a backfill.
They were talking about a backfill to make sure that cities that had X amount or whatever they've been seeing in the past, we're going to continue to see that in the future.
And I grimace, Mr. Knudsen, not at you, but we know how the state has been with their promises of backfill. So I just want us to be clear on that. So this is a tough conversation because we absolutely need our roads to get places for sure. But we also know that we can't ask people to pay more. I think a conversation that we might want to explore, have some sort of study, is we have a lot of miles of road. I've heard it compared to Boston, Massachusetts in terms of total miles of road. Might it be worth looking at some sort of study about why do we have all of those miles of road? How can we maintain them? And can there be places where it would make sense to turn those into pedestrian areas or things like that? I know that's a conversation that's sort of adjacent to this, but if we're thinking about how can we get the most for our money, keeping those main thoroughfares open, but also looking at, is everything where it needs to be, and is everything as useful as it was originally thought? But this is a hard conversation, and we have to weigh both the needs of one department and the needs of everyone, for sure.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned earlier about in-house, doing some of the work in-house. Mm-hmm. Would that provide a savings as far as not having to contract as much, or how would that offset the cost?
That's one thing we need to do a further study. But there would be cost of materials. I don't know how much equipment is needed offhand to do it. And so one of the changes when Jamie took over and when Randy had taken over as well is Public Works doing more work and more maintenance work than they probably have in the past 20 years. And so, years of this maintenance will yield benefits in the future. But right now, since they've taken over, they have done incredible work to maintain the streets and do additional work that we weren't doing. And so that's why I need to have a conversation with Randy a little bit more in depth to find out how much material would be needed, qualifications of folks to be able to do the work. But there's a possibility that can happen, but I don't have that number right offhand.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Bozen.
I've been, as you know, for the last 3 years, a strong proponent to push this forward and to help deal with property tax relief like the other largest cities in the state do. I think with what's going on with Mr. Bennett and his crew and their aggressive maintenance program is I hope is going to prolong the life of a lot of streets, especially sealing cracks and not allowing the frost heaves and all those things that are coming down each and every year that we deal with. We're going to be facing some serious shortcomings in our budget. We've faced a serious shortcoming this year, and we used $2 million of ARPA funds. And we're balancing a budget on federal grant money, which we can't continue to do. So we have to look outside the box. I'm gonna state right now that if we fix $10 million worth of streets a year or $20 million of streets a year, people are still gonna complain about the quality of our streets because that's just the nature of the beast. If we bring in $12 million plus, I would like to see 20% at a minimum. If we bring in $12 million plus, that's $2.4 million that's going to offset our budget so that we can hold the line on property taxes or decrease it. We're on the cusp of great things that could be coming to Waterloo, and if and when they do, we're going to see influx of more money. We're going to see influx of more local option sales tax. We're going to see more real estate. We're going to see a lot of great things happening in this community, and we can build on it. When Mr. Knudsen sent that letter out, he said, we're going to see this decline by 2035. But between 2023 and 2035, it gives us a tremendous amount of time to create programs within this city to help maintain these roads as opposed to farming all of this work out and paying that exorbitant, contractor cost, and we're doing it for cost. Right now, Public Works is doing a lot of the utility patching, which we always farmed out. And they're saving the city a tremendous amount of money by sending our crews out there to patch those streets when they do a utility tear up. I think we can afford 20%. I think we can't afford not to do it because we're not even going to see this until what you said, 2026 it takes effect. So we got to get through next budget year. And yet we have to have a plan in place so that we can sustain what we're trying to do. We cannot continue to raise property taxes. We are the highest tax rated levy rate in the state for the top largest cities. We've got to look at taking some of that burden off of the property or the homeowner, because they're the property owners is really feeling the pain here. So I'm 100% in favor of moving this forward at least 20%. That's just my opinion, and I think that we have smart people that work here. We have good departments that can work together to help maintain these roads, to keep them viable longer. And I think that's the route we should go. Thank you.
What else?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
I also would like for us to investigate deeper the reserves and other areas where we could pull money from, because I do understand that it's just unimaginable that we would be in the top 2 or 3 as far as property taxes, and we have the issues that we have. It's just unimaginable. So it's a tough place.
Could I ask another question if everyone's done?
Mr.
I'll wait. Go
Mr.
ahead.
Childs, and I'll come back.
Thank you, Jamie, for your presentation. Thank you, everyone. I know Mr. Both and I and Mr. Mayor and I, we've talked about this in the past. And as you probably know, my ward is very concerned about property taxes. That's the number one thing that Ward 1 talks about is property taxes. I'm not thinking we're wanting to spend less on roads. We want to find more effective and efficient ways to do our roads and find money elsewhere in order to do so. I will continue to hear about property taxes until we do something about them. So I'm looking forward to coming up with a plan that will allow us to continue to maintain our roads at an acceptable level while also taking care of our tax problem.
Anyone else? All right, we'll work. Yes, sir, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, sir. Since it has to go, we need to do another general election, and it has to go before the county supervisors, when is the cutoff time that we have to make a decision?
So this is going to be on the August 7th agenda. So I need to know like now. Because we have to if we're doing property tax relief, we have to reconfigure the resolution that we've approved in the past, and we've been advised by Spear Financial to consult with our bonding attorneys to help with crafting the language for that. So it's crunch time.
And we have to get information so the other cities know that we're doing. I had a conversation with our sister city that was interested, potentially, no guarantees, and potentially doing something maybe, so same.
I appreciate everybody's time that they put into this. So thank you for everyone's work.
Anything else, council?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion been made second. All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.